Welcome, everyone. I'm so delighted to be here this morning. My name is Helena Bodemiller-Evich. I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of Food Fix, which is a newsletter all about food policy in Washington and beyond. And I could not be happier to be here with the Marion Nestle to make sense of nutrition science, which is a tall order. We are going to do our best. Many of you are likely familiar with Marion Nestle's work. Too many books to mention, I think 15 at this point. I mean,
17.
She's 17, she's been prolific. Who's counting, though?
One came out last week.
Oh my gosh. The energy and the impact this woman has had. I think a lot more people in the country maybe are familiar with names like Michael Pollan or Eric Schlosser when they think of sort of the thought leaders of the food movement, but Marion Nestle has really been at the forefront. Some people call you the godmother of food politics or food policy. Her book, Food Politics, which came out, I think, almost 25 years ago now, was a formative book for so many people. I read this book in college. I used it in my senior thesis. So many people who work in this space refer to food politics. Michael Pollan teaches off of food politics. This is really you have like the center, the intellectual center of the food movement here. So really a delight to be here with Marion Nestle. And of course, all of her official work. Founded food studies at NYU, longtime professor. You would be so lucky to have a class with her. So I could not.
I'm retired.
Professor Emeritus. But everyone loves Marion. She's the best, and I'm just so happy. I could spend the whole time just talking about how wonderful she is. So we are going to make sense of nutrition science today. You have been at this a long time. You have seen the full arc. Like, you were kind of a lone voice, I think, at the beginning, really talking about the political dynamics in the food system and nutrition, how the food industry influences things. I wanted to start by talking about, has the public interest just been growing over time? Because a lot of people now are at your party. They are interested in food and nutrition. Has it grown slowly over time? Have there been ebbs and flows? What is the arc that you've seen for these issues?
Well, I'm not sure first of all, I have to say, I'm her enormous fan. Everybody who wants to know anything about politics, food politics in Washington, has to read Food Fix. Sorry.
I did not put her up to this, but thank you.
I mean, really, much of what I know about what's going on, I crib from her. I'm not sure there's been a trajectory that it's just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. When I first got interested in food politics back in the 1970s, when I was first handed a nutrition course to teach, and it was obvious to me right from the beginning that the politics were part of it, just right from the start. And in the first class I taught, I was using political texts, mainly based on Center for Science in the Public Interest, which had just been founded.
And that's a consumer group in Washington, does a lot of nutrition.
The big food consumer advocacy group in Washington. And there was a lot of public interest, and everybody kept saying, don't you think there's so much more public interest in nutrition and food now than there ever was before? And we're still seeing that.
Yes.
But of course, what's happened is it's on the Washington political agenda. How did that happen?
Oh, we're going to talk about it. Yeah.
It's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. It's mind-boggling. There is RFK Jr. sounding just like me. You know, talking about
a Republican. We're not sure his party ID,
but
yes,
in some ways, talking just like me.
Yeah.
Not in all ways, but yes.
Yeah. So over time, when you first started and you were writing about food politics and how the food industry influenced things, did it seem obvious to the people around you that, of course, the industry is influencing things, or was that kind of an uphill battle? Because by the time I read it in 2009, I feel like was very revelatory, but also it made sense. But we haven't always thought about things that way.
No, when I wrote Food Politics, which came out in 2002, the first edition, there are two subsequent ones, but the first question I got asked was, what does food have to do with politics?
Yes.
Nobody's asking that anymore.
Yes.
Thanks to RFK Jr.
Yeah, so we're in a very interesting moment right now where I've really only seen the food conversation shift since the beginning of the Obama administration. That's really when I started covering it. And it's changed a lot even since then. But we've really gone from now, you kind of hinted at this, a lot of these so-called food movement or food reform or caring about nutrition issues were primarily championed on the left. Like if you were to think about politicians that were raising the issues, Michelle Obama, Rosa DeLauro, Cory Booker, all those folks. And now in the last year, we've seen this huge surge on the right. And I'm curious, when did you first start noticing this was happening? Was it when RFK Jr. endorsed Trump? And all of a sudden, we saw "Make America Healthy Again." First, I'm curious how many people have heard, are very familiar with this phrase, "Make America Healthy Again" or MAHA. Okay, we've got a MAHA in tune crowd here.
Right.
When did this click for you that this was changing?
Well, I fell on the floor when I read President Trump's tweet. I'm still on Twitter, X, and he had tweeted out that he was appointing RFK Jr. to be head of Health and Human Services to make America healthy again and to do something about the industrial food complex. President Trump was talking about the industrial food complex? That's the kind of thing I talk about. And then RFK Jr. says, the food industry is poisoning America. America is sick because of what the food industry is doing. I wrote the book on that. I mean, that's the food politics, that its subtitle is, how the food industry influences nutrition and health. And so here he is hijacking my work without attribution, I might say. My feelings are hurt. And here it was. I was just stunned. Mm-hmm. I was absolutely stunned. And I've been following it quite as closely as I can since nobody from there has contacted me. So I'm not involved in any of it. But I've been watching it with fascinated interest. And fascinated to see that the first thing that they're going to do is get color additives out of the food supply. That's nice. I'm glad they're doing that. I want to know what they're really going to do.
Yeah, so I think this is sort of a key question that we're at here. So for those of you who are following MAHA, you're probably familiar that a couple of months ago, the FDA and HHS announced that they want the food industry to get rid of synthetic food dyes by the end of 2026.
Voluntarily.
It's voluntary, so there's no actual ban. It also takes a long time to ban things. You would have to go one by one and make the case on the Federal Register, which is this wonky place where all of the policy making lives in Washington. So it is a lengthy process. They are trying to do this voluntarily. And meanwhile, states like West Virginia actually did just go ahead and ban these synthetic food dyes by the end of 2027. I think it's January 2028. So we now have states, Republican, red states, just banning things, which I think was unthinkable even a year ago.
Oh, I mean, beyond comprehension. And the only thing that I can think of is that this is an issue that really resonates with younger generations. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm told by everybody that they really care about chemicals in the food supply mm-hmm. and want them out. I care about chemicals in the food supply. I want them out. I just want some other things too.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that. One moment or one quick tidbit on the everyone wants them out or you want them out, now the Republicans want them out. I was looking at the polling on this the other day, and it's really remarkable. Things like getting dyes and other additives out of food, things like mandating nutrition education and publicly funded medical schools, things like reformulating ultra-processed food or even limiting them in school meals. These are things that poll at 60, 70, even 80, low 80% approval among Republicans and Democrats, which there's not a lot of issues where you see that level of yes, we are on board. And that has shocked me just looking at the polling, because I don't know that we had that exact polling 6 years ago, 5 years ago, even 2 years ago, but I do not think it looked like that.
Oh, no. I mean, it's incredible. And I have to say something about teaching nutrition to medical students, because I did that from 1976 to 1986 at UC San Francisco School of Medicine. And when I started the nutrition program there, it was 20 years after the first American Medical Association meetings on how important it was to teach nutrition to medical students. And here we are, how many years later?
Decades later.
And the issue is still there.
We're still not doing it.
And, well, we can't. Yeah. There aren't any people to teach it. There's no time in the curriculum. I mean, and if you're a patient, I'm a patient. I'm happy if my doctor spends 15 minutes with me, and at least 5 of them actually looking at me would be nice. They're certainly not going to talk about nutrition.
A lot of constraints
So this is
there.
pretty unrealistic. The best you can do is hope that they'll refer people to nutritionists.
Yeah. So you mentioned that, getting synthetic food dyes, which I think is like the first sort of, I hesitate to call it a policy because it's not technically a ban or guidance, but it is the administration basically saying, like, we want these out. And that does certainly nudge food companies to start moving in the direction.
And they are.
Yes. Really, I think it's the West Virginia ban that's looming, which is just, again, remarkable. You have a Republican legislature who just, like, pushed this through, even though the food industry was kicking and screaming. But what are the real bigger things, I should say, that you would like them to do? And I've been thinking about this a lot. I think there is a political opening, whether you like MAHA or not. The fact that you have the right and the left now, like, agreeing on some of these issues, there is an opening. What would be like a big agenda that you think that might be realistic? Since they're not calling you, Marion, this is your chance.
How about a ban on marketing junk food to kids? A total ban. The government has been...
This crowd, for the record, is very in favor of that. Yeah.
There have been attempts to do something about stopping marketing of ultra-processed foods or junk foods to kids since the late 1970s.
Huge fights over
Huge fights over it. The head of the Federal Trade Commission lost his job over that. Congress passed a law saying you can't put any ban on television advertising to children. I want to see food marketing to kids on social media stopped, absolutely stopped, flat out. So I want to see what they're going to do about ultra-processed foods, because...
Maybe we should stop and explain what that is.
Yeah.
The gist of it, because it gets thrown around.
Junk foods it covers most of them. They're industrially produced foods designed to be irresistibly delicious, if not addictive. You can't make them in your home kitchen because they've got additives or you don't have the equipment. And there's by now enormous amounts of evidence that they are linked to very, very poor health and overall mortality. And that's observational, but there's one clinical trial that shows that they just encourage people to overeat.
To eat more.
And that's all you need to know about them. I mean, it's really, so so
far, the government hasn't said anything official. Like, we had an FDA commissioner during the Biden administration who actually said his personal view. This was not the view of the FDA, but former FDA Commissioner Robert Califf did say that his personal view was that they drove addictive behavior, that ultra-processed foods did. He said that towards the tail end, and that was like a really big deal that the FDA commissioner. Other than that, though, we've had no official government,
No, but there's conversation.
Yeah, and now, but the rhetoric has changed a lot.
Yeah.
We literally have them saying, like Kennedy saying they're poisoning us.
We should do something about ultra-processed foods. I want to see this. This means taking on the food industry. I want to see how they're going to do this, and actually whether they're going to do this. There's a second report coming out due the end of the summer, or so they say.
From the MAHA Commission.
Which will be the MAHA Commission's policy report. I can't wait to see it. I have no idea who's writing it. I have no idea, what they're doing. Apparently, it's going to come out simultaneously with the dietary guidelines, which is also something I know nothing about. You know much more about it than I do.
Well, I think it's going to be a very telling document, because so far what we've seen the administration do is outline the problems with, like, rates of diet-related diseases and chronic diseases in children. So flagging ADHD, obesity, diabetes, all of these conditions, and saying basically the status quo is unacceptable. Now, this second report that you're mentioning is supposed to lay out what the government should be doing about it. What is the prescription for that? And everyone wants to see this document because we don't really know what is the Republican or what is a Trumpian or MAHA prescription for what they are diagnosing, essentially.
Right, and I want to say just one thing about marketing to children and why that one's so important. I once went to a meeting at the White House during the Obama administration on marketing food to children. And Michelle Obama gave this eloquent speech, and then we broke up into smaller groups, and were food industry executives at my session. And one of them said, and it was a very big food company, I wish we could stop marketing to children. I know it's wrong, but our stockholders won't let us stop. And I had never heard that stated so baldly. That's what it's about. They can't afford not to stop marketing to children because it's so much of their profits are in ultra-processed foods, particularly those aimed at kids. And if they get kids eating them when they're young, they'll be eating them throughout their entire life. So
it is also probably a place where collective action, kind of like the dyes, would make it a little bit easier. The problem with the dyes is if one company takes them out and their foods are no longer brightly colored, then they don't sell as well compared to the other brightly colored foods. And it's kind of similar with the food marketing. If they don't all go together and say, we're not going to
we need legislation. That's why you need government. You need legislation so they have a level playing field. And food company executives have told me over and over, they'd be happy to do these things if everybody else would do them at the same time. So they want a level playing field.
We'll see if we'll get there. Okay, I want to talk about the dietary guidelines, which you mentioned. So the dietary guidelines, which most people don't follow, to be clear, most Americans don't actually follow the government's official nutrition advice.
Or even look at them.
But there's a lot of press coverage when they come out. They're updated every 5 years. They're technically called the Dietary Guidelines for Americans, or the DGAs. And this administration they're set to be updated this year. And both the head of USDA and HHS, so RFK Jr. and Brooke Rollins, are saying that these are going to come out very soon. And they're saying they're going to be very simple, like 4 pages. The last guidelines, which were, by the way, MAHA really likes to hate on these guidelines, but it is important to remember that they were issued during the last Trump administration. The guidelines don't change all that much every 5 years, but food companies and interests care a lot about what they say. Are they kind to coffee or cranberries or salt or whatever the thing is, right? They care a lot about what they say, even though most people don't follow them. A lot of lobbying, and they're saying these are going to come out simple and like bold, and they're going to really push Whole Foods, and they're going to come soon, and we don't know what else they're going to say. Do you have any thoughts about what you think they're going to say? And also, I want to ground it in science. How much has nutrition science really changed? Because I feel like with headlines as consumers, we're often like, oh my gosh, coffee's good, and then it's bad. And it's really confusing. And you always ground yourself in the evidence. What are you looking for in the dietary guidelines? And do you think the science has changed to warrant a big change?
Well, first of all, I have to say that the nutrition world is divided into lumpers and splitters. Lumpers look at the big picture. I'm a lumper. Splitters look at individual nutrients and individual foods. I think, from a lumping perspective, that the guidelines haven't changed at all since 1980. They say, eat more vegetables, fruits, and whole grains, duh. Balance calories so you don't gain weight, duh. And make sure you eat lots of plants in your diet. That's what, Michael Pollan could do that in 7 words. Eat food, not too much plants. That's all there is to it. Everything else is details, splitting. But those are the basic principles, and with those basic principles, there's lots of different ways to eat that are healthy. So we're starting to hear rumors. I think you're transmitting the rumors on Food Fix. There are rumors about alcohol, that they're not going to put in very many restrictions on alcohol.
Well,
it's surprising.
There's a rumor.
There's
a rumor that they're going to drop the specific recommendations. So forever it's been women should limit to 1 drink, men should limit to 2, and they might just say like
drink less alcohol.
Yeah, like limit alcohol consumption and not get specific. Where it's hard. It's interesting. Is that more permissive or less permissive? Eyes in the beholder. And we'll see how they message it, how the government messages it.
No, it's going to be really interesting to see. And I hope they use real references because the first MAHA report was found to have its references hallucinated by AI. And that was a little uncomfortable.
That was a very big scandal at the time, actually.
right.
Yeah, there were 7 references in the MAHA Commission report that were wholly fake, that had to be changed. I don't think the underlying findings were changed in the report, but it was quite an embarrassing
I only looked
scene.
at my references and they were fine.
Oh, they did accurately portray your, that's good. Yeah.
They were fine.
Yeah.
So RFK Jr. has been talking a lot about color additives, problems with the way the FDA reviews chemicals, the generally recognized as safe rules, and he's also been talking about seed oils, which are, for some reason or other, completely baffling to trained nutritionists, that seed oils are poison. And they've used the word poison.
Yeah.
So they're going to say something about that. What's interesting is they're going to completely ignore the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee report, which was 600 or 700 pages, and it came out at the end of December. That was a Biden administration report, so it's automatically dismissed. But that was a scientific committee that came to conclusions and made recommendations. One of its recommendations was that it wasn't going to say anything about ultra-processed foods, which I thought was very uncourageous of them, because the study, the one controlled clinical trial, they said was too short, so they ignored it. They ignored it, like it didn't exist. Amazing.
Well, and we should maybe mention that it's really hard to do clinical studies on nutrition because you have to lock to actually accurately measure what people are consuming. You have to lock them in a ward for a very long time. It's really expensive.
And not let them out.
Yeah. I mean, truly, they have to hire staff to make sure snacks and other things are not being smuggled in, because it would ruin the rigor of the study.
Right.
The results would be messed up, and so it is a very expensive, and really only NIH is doing these.
And not anymore, since the investigator has left. But
I think they are still working on the study. But yes, the top investigator has left.
So these studies nutrition research is hard to do anyway because people eat such varied diets.
Yeah, and then they lie about it.
Well, they don't.
They might not recall.
Yeah, I was going to say,
not recall.
Can you please put this more politely?
Can you tell everyone next to you exactly what you ate in great detail?
This morning,
or even
example.
yesterday would be hard.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
And if you don't believe me, go online and look at a food frequency questionnaire and just try to take it. Just try. So I don't know what it's going to do. It's going to say something about seed oils, I would imagine.
We don't know if it. I don't know what it will say if it will say anything on seed oils, because the evidence there is not. There isn't a lot of evidence to flag concerns about seed oils, is my understanding.
Really? Not really.
And if you ask most nutrition experts, they're like replacing or lowering saturated fat intake and going towards mono or polyunsaturated fat is one of the kind of clear things that a lot of people agree on.
This is splitting everybody. This is a classic split.
Yes. So it's possible that, I think maybe even likely, that these dietary guidelines will be more favorable to things like whole milk and whole fat dairy, and perhaps not saying go low fat. It sounds like maybe this isn't something you would lose sleep over, even though there will be folks in the nutrition community who are going to be kicking and screaming that it's unscientific if this comes out. I think you're actually going to hear a lot of noise about these dietary guidelines, and it's going to be very confusing.
And it's going to be really fun to watch. But Brooke
Marion's just oh boy, this is her Super Bowl. Yeah.
Well, as I keep saying, RFK Jr. has been such a career booster for me. It's certainly kept me busy. But Brooke Rollins made a statement a couple of months ago saying that they were going to get rid of all leftist ideology in the dietary guidelines. And I thought, leftist ideology? What on earth is she talking about? And then I thought, I bet it's plants.
Oh, plant-based.
I bet it's
lentils will not be treated as well.
So maybe meat will be back in the dietary guidelines. The issue
and people think this isn't political, you guys. How could they have ever thought that? Everyone's fighting tooth and nail to get favorable treatment.
Right.
I do think that the dietary guidelines are going to make a clear statement about ultra-processed foods. I think they are going to be clear on that. I would be very, very shocked if the government does not come up with some language around that, even though the advisory committee basically said there wasn't enough evidence.
Yeah, and I'll applaud that.
Yeah.
I will applaud that.
It's going to be
that
very...
particular recommendation. I'm looking forward to it.
I sort of like have a lot of empathy for people who are going to be reading this news, because it is going to be pure chaos. So that is your prediction. Like, whatever the dietary guidelines say, the reaction and the trying to figure out how to make sense of it, it's going to be a lot. So I sort of apologize in advance for how
and I see all of
noisy
this
it's
as a
going to be.
distraction from what's really going on, which is stuff, the serious stuff, which is the stuff about vaccination and
you can't
maybe
separate
the Third
that.
World War, I mean, that kind of thing. But it's an entertaining distraction, and I'm entertained.
I think maybe we should pause and just talk about vaccines for a minute, which, even though both of us do not cover this, we do not focus on this, but it is very much part of the MAHA coalition. It's a very loose coalition concerned about, I think, some of the most popular issues are the food issues, but also concerns about vaccines, a lot of the health freedom folks. There's some people who don't want fluoride in the drinking water. I mean, it's a really diverse and sort of disparate, diffuse coalition. The vaccine stuff is not as popular as the food stuff, but it comes with the same, or it comes with, I think it brings a lot of baggage to the food side, even though these ideas are popular on the left and the right.
Well,
and I'm curious, you've gotten some pushback from folks who just want you to
how
hate
dare
on everything.
I say anything good about what RFK Jr. is doing, what MAHA is doing, when all this really terrible stuff is going on.
And the concerns are real from the infectious disease folks. Yeah, you talk to pediatricians and they're like, yeah, I'm like with them on processed foods and chemical exposure, and then they're like, I'm literally concerned children are going to die because of the sowing more down on vaccines. So it's, I think mixed bag is a weird way to put it, but that's sort of where we are.
Yeah, but it's part of the anti-elitist, anti-public health, anti-science, a viewpoint of lots and lots of people who feel that their own personal experience and their own personal research trumps, sorry to use the word, real expertise.
And there's a lot of anger about the healthcare system in general.
Well, there should be a lot of anger about the healthcare system.
It's not fun to navigate.
There should be a lot of anger about that, but this is not the solution to the health. To fixing the healthcare system. Fixing the healthcare system is to have a single payer system that the government...
Well, now you are getting into leftist ideology, Marion. I don't know that we have agreement left and right on that yet, but
there are different views on them. Those are my views.
Yes.
I want to see universal basic income, universal health care, universal school meals, those kinds of things I think would be great public policy.
Well, let's talk about healthcare for a second, because I think GLP-1s are another healthcare element in here that have had a massive... They really are shifting the landscape on food as well. So at the same time, we're seeing this MAHA narrative from the right, and there's, I think, also been some longtime left agreement on needing to eat healthier or being upset about the food industry's role in policymaking, or whatever the anger is there. That's all brewing over here. And then we also have this mass adoption of GLP-1s, which are changing how a lot of people eat. And it's together, I think, putting an enormous amount of pressure on food companies.
Right.
And I'm curious, like, what are you watching right now as you see this unfold? Because it's sort of like they have nowhere to run. I mean, they are under enormous pressure.
Yeah. I mean,
even though the federal government's not really doing anything
totally
right now.
Fascinated by them. And I don't know whether any of you are on GLP-1 drugs, but if you are, would you come see me afterwards? Because I want to hear about your experience. But what the research is showing is that while people are on these drugs, they don't want to eat junk food. They don't want to eat ultra-processed foods. They particularly don't want snacks. They don't want sugar-sweetened beverages. They want to eat fruits and vegetables. They want more protein in their diets. And food companies are scrambling to figure out what to do with it. There have already been noticeable decreases in purchases of snack foods, sodas, and other kinds of foods like that. It's hard to tell whether that's a result of inflation or the GLP-1 drugs, because they're occurring simultaneously. So it's very hard to sort that out. But it's very clear that the companies are frantic about it and are trying to figure out what they're going to do. That's why there's this big push on protein right now. because there's this evidence that if you lose a lot of weight, you're going to lose muscle, and that the protein might help prevent some of that, although the evidence isn't very good on it.
Well, I think if you're just limiting, if you are sort of naturally limiting your food intake, making sure that you're getting adequate protein, it becomes even more important. Like I think it's a boon to yogurt and eggs and certain product, like meat sticks, like the Chomps brand. There's all this coverage about how they're just going crazy. They can't make enough. And it is kind of interesting to see like how much the consumer, like the CPG world is running in that direction, even though this is a medication or class of medications that even 2 years ago, I remember people being like, that's not going to affect. I remember when this first came out, there were so many naysayers in the food world and nutrition world. We're like, this is too narrow, it's too expensive, it's going to take so long. But it's happened pretty quickly.
No, it's happening very quickly, and the companies are clearly very, very worried about it. Nestle, no relation, has already come out with a product line. I was just reading about another product line. I mean, they're one after another after another. And they say, and ConAgra actually says on its packages, it's for GLP-1 users.
Yeah, it's a marketing thing now.
Yeah. So it's a big market. And GLP users tell me they just don't enjoy food anymore. That breaks my heart.
Yeah. Yeah, what is your favorite food, Marion?
Ice cream.
Ice cream. Well, isn't that one of the things that sort of vex nutrition scientists, because there are some like positive associations with ice cream consumption, like happiness and longevity.
I kind of like all those things, everything in moderation.
Yes.
Ice cream in moderation, but ice cream.
Yeah, it's
not ready to give it up. I just noticed, by the way, that there's just in that tent over there, there's a.
You heard it here, folks. There's ice cream over there? Well, my 5-year-old is in the audience. Where is Hank? Is he still here? Hank, did you hear that? There's ice cream.
They're juice bars. They look terrific.
That is amazing.
I will try one later. But only one.
Yeah. So I want to go back to this idea of like, nutrition science and what might actually change. We talked a little bit about additives, food additives, and this is one area where the administration is saying they're going to change things. So we've long time had this rule called generally recognized as safe, which lets certain additives and substances get onto the market without pre-market approval. And that's how most additives are now getting into the food supply. It's sort of a wonky thing in Washington. Everyone talks about the grass loophole. That's what they call it. And the FDA has said, they've indicated they're going to close this loophole. Do you think they are actually going to do that if the food industry pushes back on it? And
I suppose only if they hire back all the people they fired.
They have hired a lot of them back at FDA, because they did fire a lot of the food additive people and quickly were like,
that was probably
this is part of the agenda. I think most of those people are back now.
Yeah, I think what the states are doing is going to drive this, because Texas has a law in which it's going to ban 44 additives.
Well,
I looked at that list. It's everything in the food supply.
So this is very fresh news, actually. Texas Governor Abbott signed it last night.
He signed it last night.
So
this is how I learn things.
Yes. Food bills will come out tomorrow. But yes, the governor signed it, and it is remarkable, just going back to this left-right realignment, that a Republican governor in a red state would sign a bill. This bill has a lot in it. It's also about like PE in schools. It does talk about some nutrition education.
And teaching nutrition to doctors.
But it actually, it requires a warning label on foods that contain, I can't remember what the final number is, but it's dozens of ingredients. And it would say something like, warning, this product contains something that is deemed not fit for human consumption in like other countries, like Europe, or I think Europe, Australia.
Or New Zealand.
Wild that Texas, which isn't usually like Europe.
Texas.
Yes, right, they have it right. It's not usually the vibe. They are going to put this warning label, and what this warning label will essentially do, if it holds, I'm sure there'll be litigation over this, it is a de facto ban, right? Because a lot of companies are going to look at this and go, is this one preservative worth putting this on the front of pack? in Texas, which is a huge chunk of the market, and the way our food system works, you can't just sell things to Texas. So if one state, that's why we mentioned West Virginia earlier, if one state bans something, it's just going to be banned because food companies can't differentiate where their products are going.
Well, what floored me
in Texas, right?
What floored me were the number and the. And
it was like unanimous. Yeah,
it's just everything that the food industry uses to add
including
color, texture,
like bleached flour,
and flavor.
Yeah, a lot of
bleached flour. Can you imagine? Amazing.
It's the food industry really hates this, and they lobbied very, very hard in the Texas legislature and lost. And I think this is the thing to watch. You now have Republicans who fear MAHA and MAHA moms more politically more than they do the food companies that are lobbying to stop these kinds of things. And that, I think, is the political change that we are now seeing that has sort of been missed in this whole, like, do we like RFK or not? Because he's a very polarizing figure. That is new.
Let's hear it from MAHA moms.
Are there any MAHA moms in the audience? Probably some, yes.
Oh.
It is.
You're doing a great job.
Well, and it's also MAHA dads, but it's just, I think a lot of it is coming out of the pandemic, there are more parents that are sort of questioning food ingredients. Some of it's generational. Some of it's like the rise of wellness podcasts. There's a lot of like threads in here, but your issues that you started talking about, decades ago are now officially mainstream. They are maybe not entering nonpartisan or bipartisan, but we're definitely like moving into that phase, and it is fascinating to watch. Like,
it sure is fun.
Yeah, Marion, you're having to teach students every week. You get to watch the circus unfold. Oh. We should have an HBO circus just for food policy, and you should host it.
I write a daily blog at foodpolitics.com.
Yes.
Sign up for it.
Yes, it's very good.
You can join the fun.
Yes, everyone reads it. Everyone reads it. So we are going to turn to questions in just a couple of minutes. So think about any questions you have for Marion, who is just an absolute wealth of knowledge. I want to flash back for a minute to Michelle Obama, because we are talking so much about how this has gone mainstream lately, and it definitely is new. We are in a new era. I keep saying that. I think my reporting shows that. The rhetoric is different. But what did you see the role of Michelle Obama about 15 years ago? Because you were there in the White House a lot. I covered this. And it seems like a real kind of stepping stone to where we are now. Like, we heard concerns about childhood obesity and healthy eating and school meals get brought into the forefront. Like, what role do you think that played in where we are now?
Well, when I read the MAHA Commission assessment report, which was assessing the state of childhood health in America, not good, I thought, wait a minute, I've seen this before. And this was practically a word for word in many ways reiteration of Michelle Obama's task force on ending childhood obesity within a generation, a report that was absolutely vilified by Republicans when it came out as representing nanny state, inappropriate government interference in children's and parents' personal choice of diets for their children. Her first effort to try to change the school meal program, which she succeeded in doing,
huge fight,
was an enormous, enormous, enormous battle. And Congress intervened at the end and said you can't possibly call for whole wheat in school meals. Just really amazing things. And now here we are, some years later, that was 2010, 15 years later, with suddenly widespread bipartisan report. Well, okay, I'll take it.
Yeah.
Let's have widespread bipartisan support for this, but let's see what they're actually going to do.
Yeah.
I want to see them do it.
Yeah, I think that is the big question. What are the actual actions going to be? It is, a lot of those Fox News hosts that were just ripping Michelle Obama's Let's Move campaign as, nanny state and whatever, are now like having, they have their own podcast. Like, the MAHA supporters on the right are like, it's like Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly. Even Newt Gingrich the other day was like, singing the praises
The
of MAHA.
boggles.
It has changed so much. And I even was thinking back the other day to when, do you all remember when then candidate Barack Obama got in so much trouble for mentioning arugula on the campaign trail? This was like 2007. This is really flashing back, but I've been thinking about all this as this unfolds. It was considered the most like elitist, crazy thing to say. The McCain campaign at the time actually issued a statement like condemning it as this like very silly leftist, elitist thing. And I think at the time he did say it in Iowa, and there wasn't a Whole Foods in Iowa. He mentioned the cost of arugula at Whole Foods. It was a gaffe for sure, because now there's a Whole Foods in Iowa, but there wasn't at the time.
Yeah,
and it has just changed.
I just want to say one more thing, that I worry a little bit that the business about ultra-processed foods is to replace ultra-processed foods with clean, green products. Almost everybody involved in the administration sells products of one kind or another.
Oh, you're talking about like a conflict in another way, which is like the wellness industry,
and there's a
supplements.
And so these small wellness companies have an enormous influence on what's going on there. And whether one product substituted for another is going to make America healthy again remains to be seen.
Yeah, I think it's important to be realist about it, looking at the business interactions, the conflicts of interest, and then ultimately the actions. So with that, we are going to take questions from the audience. I know there's going to be so many. Who has a mic? Okay. You want to go right here? Right there.
Whoever has the mic gets the question.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, my question is, setting aside for a moment the very important politics, is there anything in the last 5 years in nutrition science itself, as a lumper, that you think is important for us to know? For example, I've been hearing a lot about more protein as you age. Is there any nutritional facts that we need to be aware of over the last 5 years?
I don't think so. I really don't. I mean, I think you can go back 20, 30, 40 years and see exactly the same kind of information and exactly the same kinds of things. I mean, the business about saturated fat gets softer and softer, but that's been a trend for a long time.
But I'm with you. I hear the narrative around protein, and it's really confusing because you hear so much on social media. I think a lot of it's tied also to increasing strength training for women, which is like a new thing.
Right.
So good question.
But, people eat twice as much, Americans eat twice as much protein as we need. There's lots and lots of room to be eating extra protein. I don't think you need more on top of twice as much.
I think fiber doesn't get enough attention as well.
Yeah, fiber would be, more fiber would be.
Yeah, more fiber. Who has the mic? Yeah, do you want to hand the mic? Right there in the back. You're next to, right there. No, right in front of you, right in front of you. Oh. There you go. Sorry. I'm just going to proximity there. There you go.
Yeah, talk right into it.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. So I host a podcast at the moment, and the last episode we did was actually on this topic. I don't come from the US originally, so there are lots of things that are very surprising to me here.
I'm sure that is true.
One of the core issues is this lack of high quality, consistent research, right? And the evidence base. When I was practicing medicine, I remember, trying to look quite deeply into what should we be doing in nutrition and what are we not? And it was a while ago. And as you said, not much has changed. How do we build an incentive model for different stakeholders to invest in research in this area?
Oh boy, that's a hard one.
Such a good question.
I mean, NIH made a decision that its nutrition research was going to focus on precision nutrition. Precision nutrition is you identify individual biological markers for health, and you design diets aimed at those individual biological markers. That's the antithesis of public health. I'm a public health person.
Yeah.
So I want to see more public health research. Kevin Hall, who did the experiment on ultra-processed foods at NIH and has subsequently resigned, was doing what I thought was the most important nutrition research in decades. I like to be hyperbolic about it, the most important nutrition research since vitamins, because he was able to do controlled studies, which nobody else can do. And it's the lack of control. The biggest intellectually important question in nutrition is, how do you find out what people eat? Just think about your own difficulty in remembering what you eat. Or maybe you write everything down, but you have to weigh it. I mean, it's impossible. So he was doing controlled studies. He's heavily criticized for the studies being too short, because they were fabulously expensive. And I thought everybody should be saying, we need more metabolic ward studies.
And they were cutting them. They were cutting them at the time.
And NIH was cutting them.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely cutting him down where he could only do one patient at a time. Yeah. And so that's wrong. And the food industry has moved in to try to fund research, but they're only interested in one kind of research. Prove my product is healthy.
Yeah, it's marketing.
That's all they're interested in. They're not going to fund anything else. So I think we have a huge problem of lack of really rigorous research, really difficult. Everybody who criticizes nutrition research doesn't come up with a better way of doing it. I want to see better ways of doing it.
The lack of funding is a huge challenge at the federal level. I wrote a lot about this when I was at Politico. It's like 5% of NIH's budget that goes to looking at nutrition research. Yeah, and then that would include all the observational and epidemiological research, which plays an important role, but is more less conclusive sometimes, or can get a little murkier than the kinds of studies that we were talking about. It is so expensive to do these highly controlled clinical trials, and it's or clinical studies, and I think that is like a core issue that no one is talking about. It requires money, like federal money, if you don't want the food industry and others to step in. And sometimes there can be conflicts of interest there. It's just a really big challenge.
I write a lot about conflicts of interest in research, and I ask food companies, okay, how about you guys pool your money into a common pool, we get a third party to distribute the funds, and then there wouldn't be conflicts of interest. But they're not the slightest bit interested in doing that, because the purpose of industry-funded research is to have their products appear healthy or not dangerous.
I think that's how it's always worked, right?
I mean,
it's not like,
really,
and it's not unique to the food industry. That's sort of how it works.
It's just a huge problem. And I thought the decision of NIH to do precision research, very interesting intellectually and academically, but very, very little public health implications.
Okay, we were going to squeeze in
down
more
in the
questions.
Middle. And we'll try to be quicker, because we're going to have to stop soon.
Can you come in the front here? Oh.
Yeah.
I didn't want to make you guys run around. Stephen in the front.
Oh.
Thank you very much. So there's a lot written by Peter Itti and others about inflammation and the impact on longevity and health and wellness. So tell me what you think about adults eating dairy.
I think it's a food. Unlike any other food, moderation. Your whole diet shouldn't be dairy. I'm not aware of a huge body of evidence that's convincing that dairy foods are harmful to people who are not lactose sensitive, who are not protein sensitive, who don't have specific problems with dairy. I'm just not convinced by the negative evidence, but I'm also not convinced by the positive evidence. I don't think dairy foods are essential. You don't want to eat them, don't eat them. You don't need them. But if you do, go ahead. And I've already confessed
that she loves ice cream. So we've got a very nuanced conversation happening here. All right, right there. Do you have, the hat.
What about radiated fruit and vegetables? I often buy things at the supermarket, and they just don't ripen. They can stay hard for 2 weeks.
They're mostly not radiated that I'm aware of. Spices are, and fruits and vegetables coming from Hawaii. Some fruits coming from Hawaii are, but it's mostly not being used that I'm aware of. Mostly this stuff is picked when it's
not ripe.
It's when it's not ripe, and also these kinds of foods are selected for their shipping ability, not their flavor.
There's so many vegetables that are being radiated, even at Whole Foods. Does it take away the nutritional value?
Oh no, it's it's an electronic radiation. It's not the kind of, it's not X-rays.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. No, it doesn't do
Right
anything.
here, puffy coat. Can you grab? Okay.
It doesn't do anything that I'm aware of.
Yes.
Hi, thanks a lot for
gonna
this
squeeze it.
wonderful presentation and chat. So I'm a bariatric surgeon at the university. So I deal with the worst cases of poor nutrition and the disease of obesity. I specifically also do a lot of health literacy and public health work in communities of color. And some of these communities are the ones that are affected most by poor nutrition. You know, when you started, you talked about the confusion around food choices. I mean, we have the social determinants of health, but there's a lot of confusion for everyone, regardless of your social status. And one of the issues we face is being able to disseminate the information either from the National Nutritional Dietary Guidelines or the research we are doing right now, in which I'm involved in, around food and nutrition and the disease of obesity, how to disseminate that to people. There's a lot of confusion in social media, especially amongst our young folks, and being able to take all the research and the information we are getting and being able to disseminate down to those people is really what we are struggling with. So I'm wondering what recommendations you may have, given your experience, to kind of break down or knowledge broke this information to the general public.
Such a good question. We're technically out of time, but I'm going to let Marion answer
Well,
it because it's a really good one.
I'm just going to say that MAHA is funding a national education campaign on obesity and diabetes. I can't wait to see what it looks like.
Yeah, if you have an ad agency, I believe that is out. There's an RFP out right now.
There's an RFP out on it, and it'll be interesting to see what they do with it. I think the education is not enough to change behavior. And so you can educate until you're, up the wazoo. It's not going to do any good if you don't have policies.
If you don't have
behind
access
it.
and affordability.
And so let's talk about the policies. What do we do in low-income areas? First of all, to raise income, jobs, education, healthcare. I think you start with the social determinants of health. I'm a public health person. That's how I think. Sorry.
And on that note, too, I do want to note one thing to watch is the SNAP cuts moving through Congress right now.
They got rid of the education part.
SNAP education
Right.
is slated to be cut as well, which is about a $500 million program a year for
Tiny.
cooking classes targeted at low-income communities. And
Gone.
you were touching on like a huge issue. So on that note, we could talk for another hour, and we won't. Thank you so much, Marion. Thank you for the Aspen
Thank
folks
you.
for hosting us. Thank you.
Just terrific.